My name is Maria Santos, and I'm 23 years old. I never imagined that working at a coffee shop would change my life, but that's exactly what happened last summer. Let me tell you my story. Every morning, I arrive at the Morning Bean at exactly 6:30 a.m. The quiet street slowly comes to life as I unlock the heavy glass door, flip on the lights, and breathe in the rich aroma of coffee beans. This little café in downtown Boston has become my second home since I moved here from Brazil 8 months ago. As I prepare for the morning rush, setting up cups and warming up the espresso machines, I practice my English by reading the labels on our syrup bottles and repeating the names of pastries. You see, this job isn't just about making coffee. It's how I'm learning English, one customer interaction at a time. Among our regular customers, Mrs. Thompson stands out. She arrives every day at 7:45 a.m., always perfectly dressed in her business suits, with a warm smile that makes the morning brighter. "Good morning, Maria. A large vanilla latte with extra foam, please," she says in a musical voice. She's the kind of person who makes you feel special, always remembering my name and asking about my English classes. Sometimes, when the cafe isn't too busy, she helps me practice my pronunciation. "Cinnamon," she says slowly, pointing to the shaker, and I'll repeat after her. These small moments of kindness have made my journey of learning English so much easier. Little did I know that Mrs. Thompson's daily visits would lead to one of the most challenging situations I've ever faced in my life. It was on a quiet Tuesday afternoon when I first noticed something unusual. The afternoon rush had just ended, and I was wiping down the counter when the bell above the door chimed. I looked up to see a man in a gray suit, Mr. Thompson, Mrs. Thompson's husband. I recognized him from the family photo she had once shown me on her phone. The strange thing was, I had never seen him here before. Mrs. Thompson always mentioned that her husband worked on the other side of the city and had his own favorite coffee spot there. But here he was, ordering a simple black coffee, no sugar, completely different from his wife's elaborate vanilla latte. As I prepared his order, a young woman walked in. She wore a red dress and high heels that clicked against our wooden floor. Mr. Thompson didn't turn around, but I noticed his shoulders tense slightly. "I'll have what he's having," she said, pointing to his cup. "Black coffee, no sugar." Over the next few weeks, this scene repeated itself. Mr. Thompson and the woman in red would arrive separately, always between 2 o'clock and 3 p.m., when the cafe was quietest. They never acknowledged each other inside, but I often saw them walking together through the cafe's large windows. Each time they came in, my stomach would twist into knots. I kept thinking about Mrs. Thompson's kind smile and our morning English lessons. The weight of what I was witnessing grew heavier with each passing day. As autumn arrived, Mrs. Thompson's morning visits began lasting longer. Maybe it was the chilly weather that made her linger over her vanilla latte, or perhaps she was just lonely. I couldn't tell. But those extended visits changed our relationship in ways I never expected. "Maria, how's your English course going?" she asked one quiet morning, her reading glasses perched on her nose as she reviewed some work documents. I told her about my struggles with pronunciation and idioms, and her face lit up. "Oh, I used to be an English teacher before becoming a lawyer. Would you like some help?" From that day on, our morning interactions turned into mini English lessons. She would write down new words on napkins, explaining their meanings and usage. Serendipity, she wrote one day, smiling. It means a happy accident, like how we became friends. During these morning sessions, Mrs. Thompson shared more about her life. She showed me pictures from her travels, told me about her dreams of writing a book someday, and even confided that she felt her marriage had become distant lately. "John, that's my husband. He's been working such long hours," she sighed, stirring her coffee absently. "Sometimes I wonder if he even notices me anymore." My heart would sink every time she mentioned Mr. Thompson. The guilt of knowing about his afternoon visits weighed heavily on me. Each morning, as I watched her practice English phrases with me or share stories about her life, the burden became harder to bear. She wasn't just a customer anymore. She had become my friend, my teacher, and something of a mentor. "Maria, you're such a good listener," she told me one day, reaching across the counter to squeeze my hand. "I feel like I can tell you anything." Her words felt like tiny arrows in my heart. Here she was, trusting me completely, while I kept such a big secret from her. That morning, as I watched her leave the café, her elegant figure disappearing into the crowd, I made a decision. I had to figure out what to do about what I knew. The question was, how do you tell someone you care about that their world might be about to fall apart? My decision to do something about the situation came at the perfect moment, or the worst, depending on how you look at it. That afternoon, while I was organizing supplies in our small storage room behind the counter, I heard them, Mr. Thompson and the woman in red. They had chosen their usual table, the one partially hidden behind the large potted plant. Usually, I tried not to listen to customers' conversations, but their voices carried clearly through the thin wall. "I can't keep doing this, John," the woman said, her voice trembling slightly. "Meeting in secret, pretending we don't know each other when someone might see us. What about Claire?" My hands froze on the bag of coffee beans I was holding. Claire, that was Mrs. Thompson's first name. "Sarah, please," Mr. Thompson replied, his voice low but urgent. "We've talked about this. I'm going to tell her. I just need more time. The firm is going through changes, and with the new partnership position—" "It's been 6 months," Sarah interrupted. 6 months of lies. "Your wife comes to this same cafe every morning. Did you know that? The barista probably thinks we're horrible people." I accidentally knocked over a stack of paper cups, making a loud clattering noise. The conversation outside stopped abruptly. My heart was pounding as I stepped out of the storage room, trying to act natural as I went back to the counter. Now I had confirmation of what I'd suspected all along. Mr. Thompson and Sarah, I finally knew her name, were having an affair. And Mrs. Thompson, my friend who had shown me nothing but kindness, had no idea her husband was meeting his lover at the very place where she started every morning. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept tossing and turning, replaying the conversation I'd overheard in my mind. In my broken English, I practiced what I might say to Mrs. Thompson. "I need to tell you something." "No, that sounded too dramatic." "There's something you should know." That wasn't right either. In Brazil, we have a saying, "A verdade dói, mas liberta." The truth hurts, but it sets you free. I'd grown up believing in honesty above all else, but now I understood why people sometimes chose silence. Every possible scenario I imagined ended with Mrs. Thompson's heart breaking. The next morning, she came in as usual, but everything felt different. As I prepared her vanilla latte, I noticed things I hadn't before. The slight tremor in her hands as she checked her phone, the way her smile seemed a bit forced. Had she already sensed something was wrong? "Maria, are you okay?" she asked, catching me staring. "You seem distracted today." Her genuine concern only made my internal struggle worse. Here she was, worried about me, while I kept this terrible secret. I thought about Sarah's words. The barista probably thinks we're horrible people. But I didn't think they were horrible, just human, making mistakes that would hurt everyone involved. Still, Mrs. Thompson deserved to know the truth. She had become more than a customer or even a teacher to me. She was my friend. As I watched her leave the cafe that morning, her vanilla latte in hand, I realized that sometimes being a good friend meant making difficult choices. I just wasn't sure yet what the right choice was. The confrontation I'd been dreading happened on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. Mr. Thompson came in alone, later than his usual time. The cafe was empty except for an elderly man solving a crossword puzzle by the window. Something about Mr. Thompson's expression told me he wasn't here for coffee. "Maria," he said quietly, approaching the counter, "could I have a word with you?" My hands trembled slightly as I wiped them on my apron. "Of course, Mr. Thompson." I was surprised by how steady my voice sounded. He leaned against the counter, his voice barely above a whisper. "I noticed you the other day in the storage room. I assume you heard everything?" I nodded slowly, gathering courage from somewhere deep inside. "Sir, Mrs. Thompson is my friend. She helps me with my English. She's kind to me. I know," he interrupted, running a hand through his graying hair. "Claire has always been kind to everyone. That's part of who she is." His voice cracked slightly. "I'm going to tell her, soon. I just need to figure out the right way." "There is no right way," I said, my Brazilian accent thickening with emotion. "Every day she comes here, orders her vanilla latte, and tells me how much she misses you, how you're always working late." His face paled. For a moment, we stood in silence, the only sound coming from the gentle rain against the windows and the soft jazz music playing overhead. "You're right," he finally said. "There is no right way, but I need to do this myself, please." Mr. Thompson never got the chance to tell Mrs. Thompson himself. Life has a way of revealing secrets in its own time. And that's exactly what happened the very next day. Mrs. Thompson arrived early, around 7:30 am, looking particularly tired. "Double shot today, Maria," she said with a weak smile. As I prepared her drink, the bell chimed. Through the mirror behind the coffee machines, I saw Mr. Thompson and Sarah walk in, deep in conversation. They hadn't noticed Mrs. Thompson sitting in her usual spot. Time seemed to slow down. I wanted to shout, to drop something, to create any kind of distraction. But it was too late. Mrs. Thompson had already turned around. The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah's face went pale. Mr. Thompson froze mid-step, and Mrs. Thompson, she just sat there, her hand gripping her cup so tightly I thought it might break. "Claire, Mr. Thompson started, but she raised her hand to stop him. "Not here," she said quietly, her voice steady despite everything. "Not in front of Maria." She gathered her things with deliberate calmness and walked toward the door, then paused beside me. "Thank you for being my friend, Maria. Some things are harder to learn than English, aren't they?" Weeks passed before I saw Mrs. Thompson again. When she finally returned, she was different, stronger somehow. She still ordered her vanilla latte, still helped me with my English, but now she also shared wisdom about life and resilience. "You know, Maria," she told me one morning, "sometimes the hardest lessons teach us the most important words: strength, dignity, and self-respect." Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to leave a like and share it with your friends. Subscribe to our channel for more stories in English and lessons. Click the bell icon to be notified when we post new videos. Your support means a lot to us. See you next time.